pandemic year. So.
All right, we're going live. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday to you. I'm Dr. Selma Bartholomew, Dr. B from Partner with Legacy. Thank you so much for making time to join us this evening for a powerful conversation on transformational leadership. So you have a moment to reach out to a friend and a family member, someone in your network, to ask them to be a part of this conversation today. Certainly, we are mindful of all that is happening in our nation and also in our world, but certainly in our nation. And I've received so many questions this week and messages about justice and people as a community being perplexed by this question of justice. And so today we're here to talk about transformational leadership. And certainly we will get to the climate in this country and the verdict and the issues that we have been facing certainly today and certainly more present in our lives in the context of COVID-19 and being home and everyone having the chance to watch and the distractions going away. But it did not just happen overnight. And so that's why today I wanted to spend some time with our dynamic panel members talking about transformational leadership. So welcome. I'm excited. We are going to be talking to Executive Director Janelle Faris from Brooklyn Community Services. We have Principal Claude Benz who is a leader of a charter school in New York, in Brooklyn. In Queens. And so we're excited to have him. And we're going to send special love today to Miss T Satterfield. She is in Tennessee, and I'll give a context for that in a moment. So last minute, call your friends. If you've got a heart, call any and everybody you know with a heart to let them know to join us today for our community conversations with leaders. So we wanted today to talk about transformational leadership because the discussion has been around reimagining policing, but we want to talk about transforming community, transforming systems that were not necessarily designed around equity and diversity in places that communities of color can thrive. So we've pulled together a dynamic panel today. So I'm going to give them the moment to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Executive Director Janelle Faris from Brooklyn Community Services. And hold on today because she's got a project that I'm excited for her to share. I won't give it away until we get to that. But if you want to know about what we need to be doing in our community, we need to be looking at Brooklyn Community Services. So Ms. Farris, if I'm honored to have you, let me give you a moment to introduce yourself. And the format is usually I try to ask as you introduce yourself to also answer the opening question. So my opening question is, what is transformational leadership? So welcome, and let me give you a chance to say hello to the audience.
Hi, I'm really, really pleased to be here and happy to know that Dr. B has these discussions for people to dig deep into the issues of the day. And what is transformational leadership? It is seeing and having a vision of the betterment of society and what is needed to elevate and help people to rise to their highest potential and to have the opportunity to utilize that potential in their lives.
Wow, a vision, highest potential in their lives, and that they get a chance to rise. I love that. Thank you so much for that. Setting the tone as to where we need to be going, because I don't think that that's where most people are looking at. I'm honored also to introduce Principal Claude Benz, and before the panel, we were talking about the loss of our mother tongue. And so Principal Claude Benz, please, clarify for me how to say it, and for our audience, and welcome. And please introduce yourself and talk to us about what is transformational leadership for you as you think about this work that we're engaged in.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Dr. B, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to be a part of this panel this afternoon for such an important conversation. My name is Clobens Dieu-Juste. I was born and raised in Haiti. I am a principal of a high school in Queens. I have been in education for quite some time, since I left college in 1999, if I should date myself. The transformational leadership to me is understanding that everything is done by design, right? So you don't live in a community by chance. You are placed in that community for a reason. And so realizing that purpose and taking others along with you to inspire change in that community is what it's all about. So to me, that's what transformational leadership is all about, if I can put it in a capsule.
Oh, I love that. To inspire change. Thank you for setting that tone with us. And to our audience, I want us to send a special warm hug and love right now to T Satterfield. She is dealing with a huge weight today, and she still made time for us. She is the CEO of Advancing, I want to make sure I'm saying it correctly, of Advancing Lives. She is in Tennessee, and we certainly know this week we had a verdict of police officer Derek Chauvin, and everybody kind of went home and thought that there was a victory, but instead, no, she's been dealing with the fact that a young student in her community was killed in his school building on April 12th, if I have the date correctly. And so you are in the throes of dealing with the burial of this young man and still finding time for us today. So we are sending you some love. So please introduce yourself, your work with Advancing Lives, and to give you a moment to, give us a context for transformational leadership, also in light of all that you are dealing with today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. B. When I first was introduced to Dr. B, I was like, oh, I need to know her and she needs to know me. So I am just humbled and grateful to even be asked to be on this panel, because I've been following the work that you do. So it's been exciting. But yes, T Satterfield, I am the CEO of Advancing Lives, and we do DEI work with schools and nonprofits. And so I really work with schools when it comes to, how are you training your teachers to show up in the classroom to serve our kids? White, Black, brown, whoever may be, the teacher is responsible in that classroom. We want to make sure that they are equipped as much as possible, especially when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, because you get one chance in that classroom to change this child's life. And so I want to equip our teachers with as much resources and knowledge and tools that they possibly can have. And so that's what we mostly do with Advancing Lives, and also support nonprofits when on their DEI journey as well. So board training and staff training. To just get us in a place where we're having conversations and can really implement and do the work. And I also serve on the Knox County School Board here in Knoxville, Tennessee. And so that's what, going through what Dr. B mentioned about the shooting at one of our high schools, dealing with that and really in problem solving mode to figure out this happened and how do we make sure that it does not happen and it gets better? Because we've had these tensions in our community with police officers, and we had these tensions historically. And so my role right now is to identify, okay, this happened. How do we move forward to make sure it doesn't happen? But not even just that. How do we move forward to make sure our kids feel completely safe in their school, regardless of who officers or whatever it may be? And so there's a lot that's going to come out of this, just staying lifted and staying encouraged and staying connected and supported to people who maybe been experiencing this. But when I think about transformational leadership, it comes from people like ourselves to have the courage to speak out and have the courage to I have a phrase that a friend taught me, his mother taught him, to do the don't. Do exactly what they don't want you to do. And especially if you're in a position like myself that holds an elected position seat, I'm in a system that is not here to be disrupted. But how am I able to disrupt the system, but still able to get things done that needs to move things forward? And so really valuing the platform that I have and not wasting the time that I have. We have to be courageous in doing what we're doing. So I think that's where transformational leadership comes from.
Thank you so much for that. And as I think about it in the context of our discussion today and in the context of our work as a company, it does speak to change, right? And a leader is supposed to be about change. You can't, stay in the same place. You have to be looking forward. And as we talk today, I know that we talk about there's a school to prison pipeline, But I have to be honest and say to people, I think that there's a whole slave ship. I don't think it's a school to prison pipeline. I think that our children are being housed in homeless shelters. Our communities are, homeless and the mentally ill are not being served. And so it all becomes this criminalization of people of color. And so it's not just, it sounds so neat and nice because I can think of a pipe and say it's just school to prison. But if the entire ecosystem is fueling this, we have to do more than just reimagine police. We have to think about transformations. So I want to get right to it, Director Farris. I want to talk a little bit about what do you see in terms of policy changes that you would like to see happen as from the perspective of transformational leadership? What policies can we change to begin to create that ecosystem where our children and our families thrive?
So it's really the poverty to prison pipeline. It's pretty much illegal to be poor and a person of color. And so we also, the education system, which was initiated by people of color after the Civil War, is failing our youth. It's preparing us for a society that no longer exists. The world is now evolved to a technological based society, and the skills that are required are not going to be found on these tests. We're training children to be test takers, and much of the questions asked come from a world that most people of color don't engage in. So we have to rethink testing systems. We have to rethink, we need to look at children as individuals, that they have skills that they need to develop in order to function well in society, but also to choose the path that they will thrive on. And how we create that requires great thought and shift in the way that we engage youth, particularly in communities where children are underprivileged. After school programs are one of the ways that we further the type of education that children get, and hopefully can teach a love of learning. But the funding for those programs needs to recognize that children need additional educational support, as well as physical activity and opportunity to explore, photography and 3D computer graphics, and the ability to make things using computers. They need to have their minds expanded, and schools need the resources to do that. I am not going to go into how the system is funded, et cetera. It differs.
Yes.
But the fact that poverty and racism are a part of the way in which decisions are made concerning the education system is real, and access to additional resources is difficult in a community that is underserved. And so how do you core resource the things that connected people can get in the suburbs are not necessarily going to flow to underserved communities. So how do you change those systems? I invite you to help me figure it out.
Principal Claude Bench, jump in. So what do you think about this piece around transformational leadership? And Director Farris is speaking to this space in terms of children and schooling, this poverty that exists within communities, funding, expanding their minds. And so as a principal, as an instructional leader, how do you go about thinking about transformational work in your space and creating that opportunity for rethinking workforce for your students and for the families that you serve?
Yeah, I mean, that was so well put, Director Farris. The idea that students are sitting in classrooms across our cities or across the country, and what they're learning isn't really connected to what they're going to be doing next, is a problem that we need to solve, right? Thinking about the young people in these communities, if we were to track them over the course of 18 to 20 years, how do they move, right? Do they move to, not necessarily do they move out of the community, but how are they moving intellectually? How are they moving financially? How is the work that we're doing in our schools impacting their lives, right? And Everty, you spoke a little bit about what you do, what your company does around, speaking to teachers and thinking about what is it that you're doing in front of these kids when they're in that classroom. I often say to my teachers in my school, if you run into this young person 5 years from now, and God forbid they mug you on the train, on the subway, are you going to take part of the responsibility that led to that, right? Are you going to say, man, I had this young person in my classroom for a year. I was their advisor. I was their science teacher, math teacher. Did I play a role in that, right? Because many a times as an educator, being in a building for so long, we know that there are kids who don't like school because of what we do in these buildings, right? What we do in these classrooms. And so how do you push to have these courageous conversations to let people know, those people who stand in front of your kids, that this work that they're doing is so crucial that they cannot take it lightly. And you have to, as an instructional leader, you have to give them the tools and resources to be able to do that as well. The other piece that I would add to the conversation, to this part of the conversation, and Dr. B, you and I, we've over the last year, we've been having conversations about reimagining schools. And when I met Dr. B, Everty, I said the same thing. This is someone I need to know, right? I need to have this person in my network, because we're thinking about a lot of our kids living in poverty, and they go into a school building and we have these structures where they sit in this class for 45 minutes to an hour, they learn this, and then they leave and they go to another class and they learn this. But we're not really utilizing our community as the classroom. We're not really utilizing the world as a classroom. And in many ways, we can look at COVID as, as much as it's uncovered. I'm thankful for the fact that COVID has uncovered so much. Not that we didn't know they were there before, but I think it's peeled the Band-Aid off to the point where something has to be done, right? And so how instructional leaders, school building leaders, district leaders, how are we thinking about what's next, right? When kids go back, and we're starting to bring back our students into our buildings, but how do we make sure that it's not the regular mundane school day for our kids and for our educators, right? Kids have to be able to, we know a lot of our kids work for a living. Many of them have taken jobs over the last year to help support their families. And so how do we take that and develop relationships with businesses in the community, so that because kids can do schoolwork anywhere now, right? We know that. So how do we leverage that to create more opportunities for our kids to not only learn and to apply the knowledge that they're receiving in our schools to create. We're preparing them for the jobs of tomorrow, but we're also allowing them to really see their place in that community. Going back to my point earlier about, you don't live in a community by chance. There's a purpose you must fulfill in that space.
I think you're asking some really great questions and asking us in the audience. So for those who are just joining us, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. Make sure you like and subscribe. But I think the questions that you're asking requires voice, and that's why it's transformational, right? Because there are so many systems right now. As you mentioned, the test, we're testing in New York as well. And the testing companies, they got paid. They're going to deliver 300 exams, even though there's only 10 kids in the building. And there's nobody who said, I mean, this is just absurd, right? Like, why did we just spend all of this money on testing kids when we know that it's COVID and we want to just now prove once again that our children are behind? But I say to people, we survived the slave ship and the Oregon Trail. Our children are not failures, right? We have to reimagine. So Ebony, Leader Satterfield, talk to us about transformational work. And what are the barriers that you're seeing in Knox, in Tennessee, and in your community right now that you would like to see removed, especially also in light of all that you're dealing with? So I think your eyes are probably even more open and your heart may be heavy, but I'm wondering what you're looking at in terms of barriers that we need to shift.
Yes, and what was just shared is that the matter of, like, we have to get serious. And this is something that always resonates with me, is that this is life and death for certain communities, specifically Black communities. And life and death as in the literal sense, like people are dying, and then also life and death as thriving through life or just living through this mediocre life until it's time to go. And so for me, I take it that personal. And I've always taken it that personal in all the education realm that I have, but I've realized that that's not always the same with people in education. And it's hard for me to understand that. I'm like, these are our babies. These are their futures. If there's a baby out here going the wrong way, there was an adult that failed them. And yes. That's something that that's my purpose, and that's what keeps me going. But I'm realizing that everyone's not like that, and especially the higher that you go. And I'm like, wait a minute, something's not adding up, and that's what keeps me. And this is what I'll say when it comes to transformational leadership and us as leaders. We have to stay connected to the ground, because I'm realizing as I continue to grow in leadership, the conversations that I'm having at a 60-foot level are not the same conversations that are happening in the classroom. And actually what we're talking about over here is not even doing anything in the classroom. And so it's my challenge that I give out to leaders, and even to hold myself accountable to this, is stay connected to the ground as you continue to go up. Because if you're not able to connect to the ground, then you're doing a disservice, because you're no longer serving that population that you're there for. And so always using my voice to make sure that I am bringing real life experiences. And I'm actually teaching right now in first grade, virtual school. So I have a different perspective when I'm having conversation at a board level to say, well, no, it's actually pretty successful. And this is how we adapted to it, to where we can have that transformational change within a whole entire system. So making sure that I'm putting myself in places that helps me connect at decision-making opportunities. And I think that is what we have to do as leaders. We have to stay connected, and we have to be our authentic selves in these realms. I can't go into this first grade classroom that I'm teaching behind the screen with this elected official hat on. They don't care nothing about that. They see me as a teacher. We have to stay connected and authentic, so that when those babies grow up, I made such a strong impression on them that they remember Miss Evity, and then they grow up and they realize, like, oh, she was my first grade teacher, but she was also an elected official doing great work. And so I think that's our responsibility as leaders, is to be our authentic selves when we show up in rooms that don't nobody care nothing about your title. Be there within that community so that they can see that it is possible for you as well to go along and be in leadership and be in positions where you're making decisions, because that's who we need. We need authentic people that have real life experiences and have exposure to things outside of their communities and outside of their neighborhood, making decisions. And that once we get there and get more people like that, I think that is how we see systematic transformational leadership.
I see Director Farris ready to jump in.
No, I was
Yes.
tranced. I was listening hard.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that there are a lot of people faking the funk. All right, let's be honest, right?
Absolutely.
I'm gonna just drink my water, Dr. B, when you said that.
They did not come to this position as leaders. A lot of people elevate to this position because they think, hey, I'll have some power, I'll have the better office, I'll have the corporate suite, I'll get the building, the room with the bathroom, whatever it is that you think that you were getting, but that's not what we need. And we need to be able to be honest about, you're absolutely right about staying connected and building real and authentic relationships. I want to get to the question about community and Brooklyn Community Services. You are dynamic, and we thank you for so much of that lifting that you do with after-school programs, with extended day programs, with working with the transfer schools, and just a wide range, but also going deep, right? So I want to ask you about a special initiative in Brooklyn, Director Farris, the shower bus. So those who are listening, pay attention because in New York, and I'm pretty sure in other communities as well, every time you turn on the news, all they're talking about is, we've got homeless in Grand Central and we're going to put more police. It's always a policing answer. And I understand the why, but it isn't working. It hasn't worked. So I'm excited to have Director Farris, if you would talk to us a little bit about what is the shower bus project that you were able to achieve in Brooklyn with Brooklyn Community Services.
Thank you for that plug. I should have introduced BCS when I started speaking, and I just want to take this minute to say, BCS has been in existence for 150 years, and after the Civil War, we responded to the moment and began to offer services to the people who were victims of that war, and that continues to be what we do today. Really look at the community and attempt to serve them in a way that will help them to overcome the obstacles that they face in poverty and the struggle of health concerns. And that includes the challenge of homelessness. I want to say with great pride, in partnership with the Brooklyn Borough President's Office, we created the shower bus. Yeah! The shower bus is a bus that has 2 showers in it. It's a model that is used on the West Coast in California. And we are the first to bring it to Brooklyn. And it drives around and parks in certain places, bringing showers, and the dignity that comes with just taking a shower. It helps you to feel that you are worthy of your day. And in so doing, build relationships with people who come back, and hopefully access to services will generate from those relationships. In addition, we're hoping to bring the vaccine to the streets and enable people who desire it an opportunity to be vaccinated for COVID. So it's just, we're in practice runs right now. And I just want to say, with shout out to Precinct 73 in Brownsville. Here is a precinct that has initiated a program where for a week at a time, they back off the block and bring on social service providers. And in partnership with many different organizations, we offer our services on the street and let people know what's available, and access to all kinds of things. And so it's a partnership with the police that I think is the type of thing that we need to see more of. And I just thought, in times of trouble, you sometimes need to hear some good news. And that to me is excellent news.
Thank you so much for that. And I think the word dignity, right, and relationship building is absolutely it. And I think that is exactly what we need to reimagine. Partnership, not policing, it's partnerships and the opportunity for people to get to know and to trust each other. I want to ask you, Principal Claude Benz, just.
All right.
Talk to us about community and what role community plays in your school, and as a leader, what role should it play in terms of helping our school leaders fulfill their mission, and how do you go about it? How do you go about even thinking about that common good that needs to happen within a community?
So, one of the things that we, especially at my former school, it was part of our mission. Part of our, the initial proposal for the school is that there's, we took a different approach. Before we get into the community, we wanted to instill in our kids this spirit of service, right? So once a year, we used to have this give back day where we have our kids go in the community. They go into the nursing homes, they go into the firehouse, they go into these different places in the community to give back, so they can really learn to appreciate and start seeing the needs that their communities have. As everybody was speaking, one of the things that I kept being reminded of is that being in a school building and having had so many interactions over the years with so many families, I've been privy of so much information around what families are actually dealing with, things that aren't on the news, right? So, thinking about the shower bus, thinking about how many kids we had to pull to the side and give them a backpack filled with toiletries and whatnot, really thinking about, because they're living in a shelter, they don't get that dignity back, right? Because they don't have a space to call their own, to take a shower, to come to school. But because they want to come to school, they still come, right? And so really thinking about how do we get the kids to go out in the community and give back, but also as we're doing this as adults with the kids, where it's uncovering some of these things that we need to think about at our school. Who do we need to partner with? What do we need to give our kids? What do families need? Because a lot of times that's really a lot of the problems, quote unquote, we see in our schools come from what our families do or do not have. This is something that I'm at my new school. As soon as I got on, one of the things that I spoke to my leadership team about was a give back day for our students to be able to start giving back in their community, because again, that purpose, you will not know that purpose if you don't know. You can't transform a space if you don't know what that space needs, right? And getting in everybody's mind that they're training the leaders of tomorrow, the doctors of tomorrow, the lawyers of tomorrow, right? So if they don't know what their communities need, how are they going to be inspired to do anything, right? Because a lot of times, I was speaking to a young man today. We were doing a reflection on the verdict, and I asked, I was sharing with them what I felt last year when George Floyd was murdered in front of the world watching. I couldn't watch that video for a while because how could I have the heart to watch another Black man get murdered, right? And I couldn't. I've never watched it. I don't think I watched a minute of the trial because I couldn't get myself to a place where I was watching something that, to me, is clear as day, be debated ad nauseum in a space to determine whether he did it. And so, and even in my comments, I posted something on Instagram recently, a couple of days ago after the verdict. I refused to say the man's name because George Floyd needs to be the name that we're talking about, and not the other person, right?
No, I have to disagree.
Dr. Farris, go ahead.
Go ahead, Doctor.
I have to disagree right there. because for a long time we were calling it the George Floyd case. George Floyd isn't on trial here.
Yeah, yeah.
We need to remember the man who is on trial and responsible for the
Yes.
And so say his name when you're talking about whose case it is.
Yes.
I
definitely
did not
agree
like
with
it
you
when
on
we were
that.
calling it the George Floyd case. You know.
Yeah. George Floyd is definitely not on trial, right? And so, like I said, I couldn't watch the trial because I don't think this. Anyway, I'll stop there. But in terms of how we get service into our schools, how do we get our kids to get out from the school and serve the community? I think if we get to a place where we can get everybody to understand, especially to the point of the seriousness of this work. My favorite quote to my staff has always been, "We are in the business of saving lives."
Okay.
We are in the business of saving lives. Any teacher who's ever been at my school under my leadership knows that quote, because that's something that I say often, because I believe that we're not in schools to get paid. We're in schools because we live a life of service. It's great that we get paid, but we do have a responsibility to do right by our kids. And so empowering our teachers to go out and get community resources to bring back into their classrooms is also a motto that I hope to push in my new school as well.
Thank you. I hear the conversation about language, and I think this is exactly what we want to be able to have, right? To be able to have that discourse with our children. Certainly leadership matters. In our work at Legacy, we spend a lot of time talking with teachers and asking the question, are leaders born or made? And most people do think leaders are born. They think that it's this, that you've got something different when you become a leader, rather than really thinking about what is it that needs to happen within the classroom, within the community. And once again, I know we're talking school, but I really do see this slave ship experience that our children are having. It's not just in schools. If I spend the night in a shelter as a child and I did not go to sleep till 2 a.m. in the morning, when I show up the next morning in school, that teacher is trying to get me to sit for 45 minutes, but I'm tired. I haven't showered. I haven't had breakfast, right? I haven't had the pleasure of just going to my fridge and opening up and taking out a box of juice. And so it is the school to prison pipeline, because that's where you get labeled and those things, but it's much deeper than that. And I think that's what we're trying to get to in terms of community. Everett, will you talk to us a little bit about this piece around community and the role that community plays in your work? I know that you're part of a school board, but how do you see community being redefined and reimagined in your work in Tennessee?
Yeah, absolutely. Something that keeps coming to mind, I had a boss one time, and it was before the Mike Brown case. And I used to live in St. Louis, Michael Brown case, Michael Brown shooting. And I used to live, thank you, Dr. Farris. I used to live in St. Louis, and I went to church in Ferguson. And when it happened, I was living in Chicago, and I didn't have words to articulate what I was feeling. I didn't know, but all I knew is that I needed to be there. I wanted to go back down to St. Louis, and work was just, I wasn't focused. And I shared that with my boss, and she said, okay, go, I got you. She didn't ask any questions. She didn't ask anything else. And I haven't had a boss like her since. And this was, Michael Brown was 2014. I have yet to have an experience under her. And I actually called her the other day and I thanked her. I said, thank you for just letting me go. You didn't ask any questions. You didn't make me put in no policies or put in no time card or anything like that. You just said, okay, go, we'll figure it out later. And she told me, she was like, we have to put humanity before policy, systems, procedures, rules. Humanity is first. And I know that if we can instill that into our classrooms, instill that into our leaders in our communities, that yes, these policies and rules exist, but what's the human side of the right thing to do first? Look at that first. That might not be what we choose to do as a collective, but can you at least start to look at it? And that is what I personally feel if we can just get that human aspect back into leadership and to our communities and how we treat and how we look at each other, that and I know that there's barriers, systematic racism, I know all that exists, but what is that human element first? So I think that was just heavy on my spirit, and I wanted to share, just like, let's look at this kid first, and then figure out all those barriers that they might be coming to. But I also think about community, and this is something that I've been challenged with and grown over the years since I've been in this position, is that everybody has a role to play in making it better. And I might not agree with you, Dr. Farris, on how you go about making your change. I don't think that people should get showers because we're wasting climate, right? We're wasting the water. I can have that mindset. But that doesn't mean I need to get in your way from stopping you doing exactly what you need to do for the population that does agree that showers are dignity, right? And so everybody has their lane. And something that I've learned in my elected official position, because it is a system and I have to operate within the system, but how can I back the system off to not get into your way? Even if or how can I tell you, like, this is the ropes you need to go so that I can be supportive of you. If I can't be supportive of you, then let me just sit back and just be silent versus actively advocating against what you're doing, right? And I think that is, if we can expand our minds to say everyone has a role, there's the population is vast, and we all have areas that we can grow and develop and support. Just don't get in anybody's way. Unless it goes against your direct humanity, then you can step up and step. But what I'm trying to, like, people have different ways of creating change. And so if we're all moving into that direction of creating change, regardless of it, if you agree with that or not, just don't get in the way. And that's something that I've learned as in leadership recently, is like, just don't get in the way. You don't have to agree, don't get in the way though. And so that's something that I've been reflecting on. And I do think that is what expands community, is that letting people take on their ownership and complete ownership on what needs to be done for them and their population that they work with.
I do think that people's mindset and their beliefs have been shaped by certain stories, right? And so, defining who you are as an American or as a person of color, I don't know if we've necessarily truly had this definition of humanity. And I guess I'll open that up to the panel members. Do we think that we have the same understanding of it? Because then, as we looked at the past few years, where people say, oh, well, just because something is true, does it make it right? And this discussion, we've been going back and forth rather than being able to come to some common ground around humanity, around justice, around truth, around those things that needs to be in place if you're going to have transformational leadership, if you're going to do the work. And so I'm mindful, before I open it up to questions, anybody want to comment? Director Farris, you want to comment about the humanity piece in your work as you think about?
Several things. One, humanity, and this is something I should have mentioned earlier, in our provision of after-school programs and programs working with youth, we partner with Long Island University to bring social workers who are students preparing for graduation to extend the amount of social service support that we're able to offer kids in our program. And it's necessary because that young person who's not getting a shower on the daily needs help and additional support. Can we help their family to access housing more quickly? Connecting community services and partnering with organizations can recognize that we're dealing with humans and stories within this lens, and we need to deal with the whole person. And when we're talking about schools, it's the whole family, and that is part of what we need to think about. This statement about what is humanity in light of what we're talking about, violence against people of color, well, that's a part of the problem. You know, we look at people as other. We look at homeless as less than. And so when someone tries to bring a shelter to serve into your community, you say, not in my backyard. We look at runaways as trash. Many of the runaways thrown away by their own families, some of them. And when we build housing for them, not in my backyard, humanity. We won't all thrive until we all thrive. And you doing well and driving past and not caring, spitting at, harming someone who is sitting on the sidewalk is not helping you and it's not helping them. How do we look at each other in the definition of humanity in our daily lives, in our political stances, in everything we do? Humanity and the definition of it is critical. But we need to see each other and all humans. Asian people getting beaten, rocks thrown out of car windows because you were Asian. What is that? You're not seeing Asian people as human. It's humanity. We need to all drink from that cup. It's tragic, really.
I fully agree, and I'm gonna I want to ask the audience if there's questions. Put it in the chat. I see some people texting me already. You know, some of the questions, and I do think, however, though, there's some storylines that we would have to debunk in order to get to a place where we truly do have a shared understanding of humanity. And I think that when people look at someone who's homeless and a runaway child, or somebody who's had a tough life, they see that as part of the American story, right? Like sooner or later, you'll be able to pull yourself up. And we want to champion the one or two individuals to do that. And we keep showing that in the movies, and that's the kind of narrative that we tell. And those are great stories, but that's not the mass of people. The mass of people are living below the poverty line. We found out that people would rather get unemployment checks than go back to work in this pandemic, whereas also other people are buying $2 million homes out in the Hamptons in New York, right? So there's this big divide, and I think it goes against the narrative of what we've been fueled in Hollywood and that we keep telling ourselves, and making that person feel bad when they can't access and when they can't move, because then they blame themselves. They don't necessarily blame, blame society. I want to give a question from the audience, if that's okay. Go ahead. And if
700,000 jobs lost. So, you know, this city's economy will only turn around, estimated, 5 years. So when we talk about who's collecting unemployment, let's be real, a whole lot of people who need it.
Yes.
This is a long-term economic disaster.
Yes.
And the turnaround is going to be tough. And yeah, so.
I have a question from the audience. It says, how does transformational leadership shape change for economic empowerment of community schools in both high and low density populated minority communities? So this person is getting to the question of economic empowerment. I'm going to let Evity, Leader Satterfield, I'm going to let you maybe speak to that. A transformational leadership, how does it shape change for economic empowerment of community schools in both high and low density populated minority communities?
Yeah, that's a heavy question. You know, I feel like if I get the answer right, somebody's gonna tap me on my shoulder and give me a whole bunch of money and say, "Hey, implement this." So let's see.
For those who are listening, that's right. That's how we keep it real. We actually go deep here at Partner.
No, I think it goes to what Dr. Faris just said. Director Farris just said is that we've lost jobs. And so now it's our role as leaders. I'm thinking like the school systems and the school leaders, or just community leaders throughout, is how do we tap into our babies to say, and I'm talking high school, middle school kids, to say, there might not be a job in the next couple of years that you ideally want, but we can show you some entrepreneurship right now. And what do you do? So how can we instill this at our kids at a young age to create the job? And I think this is something education has been talking about, but this is a critical point to, if we're serious about transformation and transforming our communities and transforming our schools, use this as an opportunity. Because like Director Faris just said, the jobs aren't there. There's so many more people that's entered into entrepreneurship. So how can we use our community centers and our after school programs to instill in the second grade and the third grader, this is entrepreneurship, so that when they get to middle school and high school, they already understand how to make money. They already understand how to, and then we just invest in them even more to how to manage that money and how to scale up, so that when they're graduating high school, now the world is open. So that is how I feel we as a community, specifically a Black community, that's what we've always been. We've never as historically been allowed to be a part of the systems that are there. So we create our own. So it's almost as if this is a perfect opportunity to get back to our roots of creating our own and instilling that in our very early age.
Well said.
If I may add to that.
Yes.
I think, to that point, really thinking about how do we empower them to be transformational themselves, right? From the community standpoint, right? So as they're learning to create, how do we get them to think about what is it that my community needs, and how can I create that thing that is going to not only generate income but also serve that community? I think we can certainly play on that. Again, talking about purpose. What is your purpose in that community? You didn't just get rich and left and went somewhere else, but your community benefited from what you created and what you've become.
Well said. Dr. Farris, your thoughts, the economic empowerment within our community?
I'm actually going to highlight a program that you reminded me, Principal Diajust.
Yes.
We in Africa, there's an organization called Educate with an exclamation point. Look it up. And they created a program to help children to think, problem solve. And children worked in teams to create businesses which had to serve a purpose for their villages. And the teams were very creative. One team didn't have any money. It was a poor school district. So they used flower seeds and began basically selling flowers that they grew, and each keep investing until they were able to build a well for their community from the money and employ other kids in their business. And kids designed things that they later grew into companies. It's an idea that has worked in other countries, and I do not have the bandwidth to create it myself, but I invite you to partner with a nonprofit and make it happen. It's something that can happen.
Director Farris, I think that's interesting that you brought that up, because going back to the whole America facade that, oh, that's over in different countries that they need something. No, we need that right here in our backyard. And so really getting America to understand that, yeah, we're going on these mission trips and going to these different countries, and they do have some, like, America is still very privileged according to other countries, but we also have high needs in our own backyard too. And so that really resonated with me, is saying that people will run over to different countries and not look at what's going on here.
I please don't associate that with educate. I think it's a fine organization doing amazing work and hiring
Absolutely.
people who live and reside there and affecting thousands of children and communities. Great organization. I get the point.
I think also I love the idea of partnership as well, right? That entrepreneurship. I'm an entrepreneur. I've owned my own business now, founder for 12 years. You got to like the cold out here, all right? And I'm being very, honest about it. And it's okay to partner with organizations as well. And so we've not had that as a community. And when we think about the diaspora, it's not just here. It's the diaspora, it's the Caribbean, it's in Africa, and the needs are great. And we're not people poor, we're not land poor, we're not resource poor. And we need to now shift our mindsets to really thinking about those principles of community, those principles of development leadership. For us as a company, it's about mathematics and STEM. It's about math and STEM, that this is the future. We can no longer tell our kids that they can't do math. And you cannot access the jobs of the future if you do not and have not been successful in math and in STEM. And this constant labeling of our children as failures in this field, and the way in which the tests are designed to make our kids and to keep labeling them as failures and to keep pumping money into places and spaces that they're, to just kind of keep reproducing. We call it the social reproduction of failure. So as we think about economic empowerment, it is about math, and it is about STEM and student leadership and all of the wonderful things that you pointed today in terms of relationship building. But I also want to say we have to reimagine workforce development within our communities. It's not working. Mayor Bill de Blasio recently announced, he's got 5,000 jobs for kids to go sweep the streets. Well, that's great, but then that don't lift me out of poverty. That doesn't take me out of poverty in any way, shape. So when we think transformational leadership, we want to do something far more empowering. We want to see STEM centers. We want to be able to say that vaccine right now is not only going to make trillions of dollars, it's trillions of dollars that just left our community, and we're the ones dying. So this economic engine and economic empowerment is important to us. It's important also because Black and brown businesses are not making the money. Everybody's saying now there's equity and diversity and we need to buy Black, but that's not true. The policies and the contracting hurdles are deep. And the funding is being cut too from organizations like BCS, organizations that have been, doing the work. And so it becomes harder to navigate in this space when everyone is telling you this is your time, but the fight is very real in terms of for economic empowerment. For the audience, please continue to like and subscribe. We appreciate you making time today to have this important conversation with us on transformational leadership. I'm mindful of the time, and so I want to ask each member of our dynamic panel a final question, and I'm going to say it takes courage too, and I'll let them finish up. But before you answer the question, can you please tell our audience where to find you? And if they wanted to access any more information about your work, about your company, please, Evity, please make sure you share the website. And if there's any upcoming events or anything that you would like us to tap into and to support. So I'll start with you, Principal Claude Benz, just. If you would be so kind, to let us know, where to find you, and most importantly, the final question. It takes courage too.
It takes courage to do the right thing. You can find me at my new school in Queens. It's a charter high school, part of the New Visions Network. newvisions.org/AMS4. You can also find me on LinkedIn, my full name, Clobens Just. You can find me on Instagram as well, and Twitter. I don't really use Twitter, but you can certainly find me on Instagram. Definitely really appreciated the opportunity to be in such great company this afternoon, and I look forward to connecting with each of you after this, because it looks like our work has a lot of links that I would love to explore. Thank you so much for including me in such an important conversation.
That's why we're putting the charge on you. You're going to get a shower bus in Queens, right? Because we can't just have one. It's not enough. So
That's right. We know what our communities need. And so we have to be courageous enough to do the right thing and provide that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. And we absolutely do look forward to continuing to connect and to support each other. And I thank you also for leading in the crisis and for being a transformational leader for your students, and for your community, and just being a voice as well, a voice of reason and a voice of hope. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Leader T Satterfield, tell us where to find you, and anything that you are doing as an organization, and also in Knoxville, how can we support you as well during this time of crisis and heart? And once again, we send our love to you. So let us know where to find you. And it takes courage too.
Yes, absolutely. So T Satterfield, you can find me information about my company at advancinglivesllc.com. That's advancinglivesllc.com. And I also, on all social media platforms, is Evity Janese, Janese. So that's where I kind of keep up to date with just school leadership and my approach to education. I need to do a better job. We're going to do better on our social media end, but we're doing it's there.
Yourself, you're doing so much.
It's like, thank you, Dr. B. And so, so that's where you can find me. The work that I do is really, I've been blessed that all the opportunities that I have come to me and said, hey, Evity, can you help us do this, or can you lead this? And I'm so grateful for those opportunities because it also shows me that you're serious about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really taking the lives of our kids seriously versus me reaching out a wide net. And so I take the work that I do really seriously, and the clients that I take on seriously. So if you're serious about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we can talk and what it means in your classroom. But I will, like I mentioned earlier, I will give this to the late Nkechi Ajanaku, who I learned this phrase from, is it takes courage to do the don't. And so in all leadership, just continue to do the don't. It takes courage to do the don't.
Well said. Well said. Thank you so much. And once again, our love, and please stay encouraged, and remember to have compassion for ourselves. We do so much as leaders and as entrepreneurs. We cannot do it all. We wear a lot of hats. And so thank you for sharing your voice. And we look forward to connecting with you and supporting you in Tennessee and as you grow also nationally in your work. Thank you. Director Farris, thank you so much. Please let us know where to find Brooklyn Community Services and how we can help and connect with you as well. And I'll ask you the same question. It takes courage too.
This has been so amazing, and thank you. It's a pleasure to speak with both of you, and I look forward to hearing about your future successes and perhaps talking to you in person. My organization is Brooklyn Community Services, and you can find us at wearebcs.org. Just like you're saying, we, you and me, RAREBCS. And I invite you to write and join us, and you can reach me there through the info link. I'm also on LinkedIn and more social media than I understand. My name is how you'll find me. And shoot, go for it. You'll find me. It takes courage to change, whether that change is your, daily routine, my bad habits, and whether it's systematic change. And we're going to have to do a lot of it going forward. So I hope that we can all do it together and do it well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you to BCS, to Advancing Lives, to New Visions, and your leadership, Principal Claude Benz. Thank you. On behalf of Partner with Legacy, we thank you. I would like to invite our audience, please come back with us on Thursdays. We do our Legacy Ed News at 8:50 a.m. in the morning. Our next webinar is in May, and we're going to do a special tribute for Malcolm X. We're going to do Malcolm and Betty, a love story. And we're not going to do it on a Thursday. We usually do it to honor his birthday, which is on May 19th, which is a Wednesday this year. So please make sure you join us for that. And for us, I think it absolutely, I'm reading a text that someone said, thank you for sharing an empowering thought and helping us move forward for today and also for tomorrow to the panel members. It takes courage to lead. It takes courage to lead. We're going to have to step up and stand in the gap for our children and for our families. And so I want to once again thank you to our dynamic panel members for being transformational leaders. And we wish you well, and please continue to stay safe. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel before you leave, and check out one of our other videos as well, one of our other community conversation with leaders webinars. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. B.
Thank you, everyone.